Hello everyone and welcome. Today, we're jumping into a story that's absolutely foundational for understanding modern Kerala. We're talking about a 400-year saga of ships, spices, and power that kicked off when the first Europeans arrived on the coast. Trust me, this didn't just change a region, it completely redrew the map of global trade.
All right, let's get right into it. The key thing to grasp, especially for your exams, is that this isn't about memorizing a bunch of dates. Nope. It's about understanding the why. It's a story about a massive power struggle, about clashing policies, and about a relentless fight for control over one of the most valuable resources on the planet.
So what lit the fuse? I mean, why would these European nations sail halfway across the world, facing incredible dangers? Well, it really boils down to three huge motivations.
And here they are, the famous 3 Gs. First up, gold. You see, the spice trade was the big moneymaker back then, but it was totally locked down by Arab and Venetian merchants. The Europeans were desperate to cut out the middlemen and get a direct line to the source. Next, glory. In that era, building a sprawling overseas empire was the ultimate flex, the biggest symbol of a nation's power. And finally, God. Don't underestimate this one. The mission to spread Christianity was a very real and powerful force driving these expeditions.
First to the finish line, the Portuguese. And listen, they didn't just show up to trade and go home. They were the game changers. They absolutely smashed the old trade monopolies and kicked off the entire era of European influence on the Malabar coast.
And this is the exact moment it all started. May 20th, 1498. Vasco da Gama ships anchor at Kapid, near Kozhikode. He's greeted by the local ruler, the Zemran, who probably thought, hey, new trading partners, more money for me. Little did either of them know that this one meeting would spark centuries of unbelievable change.
Now, the Portuguese didn't just have one single game plan. Their strategy was really shaped by two key leaders with very different ideas. On one hand, you had Francisco de Almeida, the first viceroy. His whole philosophy was what he called the blue water policy. Basically, control the seas and you control everything. But then came Alfonso de Albuquerque. He's often called the real founder of Portuguese power because he thought differently. He believed real lasting power came from controlling the land. That's why he captured Goa and even encouraged his men to marry local women, trying to create a loyal mixed-race population.
And their impact was huge, way beyond just buying and selling spices. They brought in something called the cartas system, a sort of protection racket on the high seas. If you wanted to sail, you had to buy their license. They also brought the very first printing press to India and introduced crops we can't imagine living without today: cashew, tobacco, pineapple, you name it. But it wasn't a peaceful takeover, not at all. They were locked in a fierce 100-year war with the Kunjali Marikars, the incredibly tough naval admirals of the Zamorin.
All right, so after the Portuguese, who's next on the scene? The Dutch. Now, they were a bit different. They came in mostly focused on business, on trade. But, the politics in Kerala were complicated, and before they knew it, they were dragged into a local conflict that would lead to a massive, history-making showdown.
Okay, I want you to burn this year into your memory. 1741. This single year is a massive turning point, not just for Kerala, but for the whole story of European power in Asia.
And here's why that year is so critical. The Battle of Colachel. This is where King Marthanda Varma of Travancore and his army did what nobody thought was possible. They defeated a modern, powerful European naval force. I mean, this sent absolute shockwaves across the continent. It was the first time an Asian kingdom had properly beaten a European power, and it slammed the brakes on Dutch ambitions right then and there.
But the story gets even wilder. So the Dutch commander, a guy named Eustachius de Lannoy, was captured. You'd think that's the end for him, right? Nope. Marthanda Varma saw his military genius and, instead of locking him up, hired him. De Lannoy went on to completely modernize the Travancore army, becoming its commander-in-chief, known locally as Valya Kapithan, the Great Captain. Talk about a plot twist.
So that crushing defeat on the battlefield, it had huge ripples in the world of politics. 12 years later, the Dutch had to sign the Treaty of Mavalakara. In it, they basically had to swear off getting involved in local politics forever. That treaty was the final nail in the coffin for their dream of building an empire in Kerala.
And now, we come to the power that played the long game, the one that would eventually outmaneuver everyone else. The English. See, they didn't have the explosive start of the Portuguese, and they didn't get knocked out early like the Dutch. The English were patient, strategic. They built their empire slowly, almost brick by brick.
You can see their whole approach right here. It was a slow burn. Instead of going for all-out conquest right away, they focused on setting up these trading posts, which they called factories. Look at the timeline. Over several decades, they carefully established these little footholds along the coast. Each one was a strategic move, laying the foundation for what was to come.
Of course, as their power grew, so did the tension. And in 1721, it boiled over in the Attingal Revolt. This wasn't just a random skirmish. It's considered the first real, organized uprising against the British in Kerala. What caused it? Well, people were furious about the British manipulating pepper prices and acting less like traders and more like rulers. It was a clear sign that the rise to power was not going to be easy.
So, let's step back for a second. After all this, nearly 400 years of trade, treaties, and battles, what was the end result? What kind of mark did these European powers leave on Kerala? Let's take a look at the big picture.
This table is just brilliant for a quick summary. You can see what the locals called each group. The Portuguese were Parangical, the British Saipamar. You can see their main bases, and really importantly, what or who caused their downfall. And check out the last row. Each power left something different behind. The Portuguese brought new crops, while the British completely overhauled administration and brought in things like railways. It's a great way to compare their legacies side by side.
And this legacy isn't just in history books. You can still see and touch it today. The beautiful Bolgati Palace, that was built by the Dutch. The incredible Hortus Malabarchus, a massive encyclopedia of Kerala's plants, was a Dutch project. But it wouldn't have been possible without the deep knowledge of local experts like the Izava physician Iti Achudan. And of course, the British influence is everywhere, in the systems of government, education, and the railway lines that still crisscross the state.
Okay, quick exam tip. This is a classic trap that catches so many people. When you're asked about the first European fort in India, the answer is Menwal Kota, built by the Portuguese in Cochin. But if the question is about the first British fort in India, that's Fort St. George in Madras. It's a subtle difference, but getting it right can be the difference of a mark. So, don't get tripped up.
So you see, from the spices they craved to the schools and railways they built, this 400-year encounter left no part of Kerala untouched. It was a messy, complex period of conflict, but also of collaboration and exchange. It really makes you think, what is the single greatest legacy from this entire era? Something to ponder. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown.